everyone! This is Amelia from the Baltimore County Public Library, back with another video in honor of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in May. AAPI Heritage Month is an annual celebration of Asians and Pacific Islanders in the United States. Initially enacted by Congress in 1978 to be a week-long celebration starting on May the 4th, Congress passed a public law in 1992 designating it to be an annual month-long celebration. May was chosen to be the commemorative month due to two important dates. First, on May the 7th, 1843, the first Japanese immigrants arrived in the U.S. Secondly, the Transcontinental Railroad was completed on May the 10th, 1869. Most of the laborers who laid the tracks were Chinese immigrants. In this video, I will be demonstrating the Japanese technique of paper marbling called Suminagashi, which translates to English as ink floating. It is thought to be the oldest form of paper marbling, originating in China over 2,000 years ago. Suminagashi is documented as being used in Japan during the 12th century by Shinto priests. Now, traditionally, sumi ink is used in Suminagashi. Go figure, right? The liquid form of sumi ink is made in the traditional way by grinding a stick of ink, which is compressed pine soot and a glue of some kind, it's usually an animal glue, into a grinding stone while adding water. And then the ink that you use to paint with will then be pooled like in the bottom here. Sumi ink is readily available today in a liquid form. So even though I use both in my own studio practice, I'm just going to be using this stuff today. Now we have materials. So the first thing you're going to need, which is what I already mentioned, is ink. And I'm going to be just using the readily available Sumi ink. And then I'm also going to be using some colored ink, which is from this Suminagashi kit that you can get really easily and inexpensively online. And then the second thing that we're going to need is what's called a surfactant. Now, surfactant is going to reduce the surface tension of the water, so it's going to allow the ink that we put on to spread out into these really cool patterns, which I'm excited to show you. So even though you can buy surfactants, again, I'm just going to make some surfactant by using cool to cold water with just a drop of dishwashing detergent. I mean, very, very little dishwashing liquid, I guess I should say, and then mix it together. Then we are going to need at least two paintbrushes, one for the ink, one for the surfactant. We are going to need some at least room temp water. I personally prefer cool to cold water that we are going to fill a tray up with, about like an inch and a half, so not very much. So you're going to also need a tray. And even though I have that tray that I'm going to be using, I honestly taught myself using a repurposed carryout container, and I think that this works just as well. You absolutely don't need a tray. And then we are going to, of course, need some paper to marble. Now, I hope you can hear, judging by that sound, that this is thicker paper. So you're going to want to find something that either has multimedia or watercolor in the description. You're not going to want to use printer paper or notebook paper or any thinner paper because it's going to buckle. It's not going to be able to take the water and the ink. And then finally, we are going to need some paper towels. And what we're going to need these for is we are going to lay the paper on them once we've pulled them up from the tray with the ink and the water, and then we're going to lay them down on the paper towels so they can absorb any excess water or ink. Okay, so I've filled my container with about an inch or so of cool water, and I've waited for all of the air bubbles to disappear. Now, something I also wanted to highlight was I have set up my workspace in such a way that it will be easy for me to dip and place the paper and to keep my materials in order. I think particularly for this activity, organization is important. So this is the brush that I'm going to designate as the ink brush. So I am just going to dip it in my Sumi ink that I have on a little palette here. And I don't want the brush to be like dripping with ink. I just want it to be, you know, enough to just be able to dab it in the water. And something else that I also want to point out is I want to make sure that this tip is pointed like that. We don't want it to be like all split out. All right, so that's the ink brush. And then I'm going to do pretty much the same exact thing, only with the surfactant. So right, this was our dishwashing liquid and cool water. So again, I have like, just make sure it's pointed. All right, so I'm going to just lightly tap the top of the water with my Sumi ink brush. And then I'm gonna do my surfactant brush, Sumi ink, surfactant, Sumi ink, surfactant, Sumi ink, surfactant, and so on. I'm just gonna keep doing that. So if you can see how as soon as I touch with the surfactant, the ink blows out. So remember, that's that surface tension of the water being reduced. So I'm just gonna keep going. And eventually you will have to re-dip some things. Dip my Sumi. And just... blow it out like that. All right. So then I'm gonna take a piece of my paper, again, a really thick paper, and I'm going to lightly drop it, just real lightly, and then peel it up. And then voila, we have our Suminagashi paper marbling. Cool. So I'm just going to stick it on the paper towel, and I'm gonna blot it a bit to clear out that excess water. So isn't that cool? Okay, this time I am going to experiment with some of the inks that are in this little set that I showed you. I'm just gonna pull out the red ink and put in a couple dabs there. And as a reminder, I have got new water. I'm gonna make those little air bubbles disappear. Okay, cool. All right. Actually, I'm gonna put some more in. So now, with the addition of the other color, I'm gonna get a third brush. So what do I want to start with? I think I'll just start with the red. So again, I'll get this brush saturated but not dripping. And I'll get some more surfactant. And then I'm just gonna repeat the same process, making sure to like come in from the sides like this, not just straight down. Ooh. It's so fun to be able to play with the colors, right? Alright, so I'm gonna put that one down, and then I'm gonna come in with some Sumi ink up here. You see how the one ink is pushing the other way? And you can actually even use like bamboo skewers to start making patterns too. Almost put my red ink in my surfactant. That would not have been good. See, it's just like super fun to play. Just play. Alrighty, this is kind of funny looking. I'm really curious to see what is gonna come from this one. Let me just get rid of some of the excess there. Super cool. And like this looks super bright now, but it's actually gonna dry to a much more like subtle color. So as you can see from these examples, at least I hope you can tell, is that Suminagashi is meant to be a subtle technique, and that's in contrast to the more flashy traditions of Western paper marbling. So Suminagashi is meant to balance whatever else and complement what else the paper is going to be used for, so like shodo, which is Japanese calligraphy. And as I mentioned, that's in contrast to Western traditions, which are meant to be more flashy and bright. I think about M papers on books that are used in bookbinding. So once you get the hang of Suminagashi, which I admit for me there's a little bit of a learning curve, it's so meditative and it's so lovely to see the results and to really just like work in tandem with the ink and the water. If you are interested in learning more about Japanese art forms, check out The Art of Sumi-e by Naomi Okamoto, Japanese Paper Flowers by Hiromi Yamazaki, both Shishiko in color and Simply Shishiko. And then for a Japanese take on an American craft form, check out Shizuko Kurua's Japanese Patchwork Quilting Patterns. If you're interested in learning more about Asian art forms, check out my video from last year highlighting the Korean textile art of Bojagi. All right, thanks for watching.